There is a part of Brazil where the jungle is so dense that the rain is a soundtrack and the wind rarely touches the earth beneath the canopy. In that vast Amazonian reach, including the state of Para, religion is not an abstract belief. It is life, community, identity, and too often, the very thing that decides whether someone lives or dies. Pentecostal and charismatic churches are widespread here, mixing deliverance rituals with traditions older than maps. Most of these services are peaceful, but hidden among them have been episodes of brutality that have scarred communities. Long before internet conspiracy lore ever seeped through the rainforest, something far more chilling took place in the Amazon in November 1998. A group of villagers had become followers of a fringe religious sect affiliated loosely with a local evangelical movement. The leader, a man named Francisco Bezerra de Moraes, known among parishioners as Toto, preached that demons were not just inside people, as hearts and minds, but literally walking the forest, walking the towns and entering bodies unless they were violently exorcised. According to multiple news reports from the time, the violence began with fear and ended in death. The sect was small, no more than a few dozen followers, but in its fear, it became fierce. It was not a charismatic healing service with uplifting songs. It was extreme deliverance taken to a place where fear overwhelmed reason. One Sunday, Toto stood before his congregation on a makeshift pulpit of rough-cut hardwood, hands shaking as he spoke of spirits that laughed at prayer and lived in flesh. He claimed Jesus had spoken to him that morning, telling him that possession was everywhere and the church must purge the evil before it consumed them all. What followed was not a service, it was a hunt. The first victim was not attacked in the street. The first victim was a man in his 40s, a dedicated member who had joined the sect only months before. During a supposed deliverance ritual, Toto and followers tied him down with ropes and forced him to confess, screaming commands for the demon to come out or be destroyed. Witnesses later told investigators that when the man cried out in pain, Toto declared it was not suffering, but proof of demonic resistance. They hit him repeatedly with wooden rods, chanting at the top of their lungs, insisting the blows purified him. The man died there on the dirt floor of the church hall. Fear didn't stop with one death. It escalated. As some villagers fled the sext compound, others remained, driven by groupthink and the terror of being labeled possessed if they questioned their leader. The sext gatherings became ritualistic, not prayers so much as commands, not blessings but tests of endurance. More members who hesitated were tied, beaten, and ordered to expel evil or be purified through suffering. Witness accounts from local authorities and journalists describe bodies found with bruises, broken ribs, and signs of long-term restraint. In several cases, investigators documented that victims had died, not instantly, but over hours, their breathing shallow, their eyes unfocused, still restrained when the paramedics finally arrived. These were not isolated freak accidents. The violence was systematic, part of the sect's doctrine. Once the leader proclaimed that demons had multiplied and become stronger than faith alone. The final tally in that 1998 incident included 6 deaths, according to contemporaneous Reuters and Associated Press reporting. Those killed had been judged by their own community as too weak, too resistant, or too invaded to survive the exorcism ritual. What makes these deaths especially haunting is that they were not shrouded in mystery or myth. They were reported by major news outlets at the time, investigated by authorities, and remained part of Brazil's documented history of religious violence. The pastor in charge claimed until the end that God had commanded the ritual and that the deaths were spiritually justified. The legal consequences were complex. Decades of court wrangling followed as questions about insanity, religious freedom, and culpability collided. In the years since, violence driven by spiritual rhetoric has taken many forms across Brazil. In urban settings like the metropolitan slums of Rio de Janeiro, neo-Pentecostal preachers have sometimes been linked with campaigns against other religions, actions that human rights scholars describe as persecution and displacement aimed at eradicating viewpoints seen as demonic. In more isolated regions of the Amazon, deliverance rituals can last hours or days with fasting, shouting, and sometimes physical restraint, especially where churches blend older indigenous belief systems with evangelical promises of spiritual battle. Interviews with survivors of dangerous deliverance practices, people who escaped a ritual only to later speak to journalists, or activists often reveal a shared pattern: the belief that failure to endure pain, hunger, or forceful prayer meant the person was still inhabited by evil. The line between theological conviction and brutality becomes unreadably thin. Dangerous exorcism practices in Brazil are not matters of folklore. They are part of the lived tension between faith, power, and vulnerability in communities where institutional medical or psychological care is scarce and spiritual explanations fill the gaps. It is worth noting that the majority of Pentecostal congregations never engage in violence. Many emphasize healing, community support, and positive transformation. But in isolated pockets, where charismatic preachers hold unchecked authority, where fear of spiritual attack is woven into every sermon, and where group dynamics suppress dissent, deliverance can go from speech to suffering, from ritual to execution. The jungle is silent now in Para, no chanting, no cries. Yet the earth remembers. Those deaths, 6 men and women beaten under the belief they were possessed, are not written off as legends. They are recorded fact. Reminders that sometimes the most terrifying demons are human belief gone unchecked.